Alright, today I'm going to be showing you the 3 synths that you need to know to make modern trance music. These are in all of the tracks like DJ Heartstring, Southstar, all of those kind of guys. I'm using pieces from my core trance sample pack. The link to that's at the top of the description. It's got this stuff you see in the video plus literally everything you need to make trance. As you can see, thanks for the support guys, and let's get started. So, the first synth that you need to know to make trance music is going to be this one. Our classic pluck bass. There's not really too much to say about this. Obviously, the notes are pretty simple, although they can be more complicated too. Like in this case, we just have just on the upbeats like that. I've also seen, like in a lot of the heartstring tracks, for example, they're doing stuff like this. You know, like that kind of rhythm, right? You could also just do like this. Right, so there's a lot that can be done within the bar, but it's these simple patterns. Again, a lot of times it can just be on the upbeats like that. It really depends what works with your track, right? With these drums, you can hear that a lot of different things work with it, but certain grooves will be different. And this is also why I advocate for making the drums before and kind of making this to the drums. The other thing with this is usually going to be your chord progression in the track. Or like in a lot of cases, this is really carrying that. Like here you can see we're going, if this is E minor, we're going 6, root, 7, and then back up to that 6. You can also view this as C major, where we're going root, major 3rd, major 7th, and then back to the root, but don't drive yourself crazy like that. Now, as far as the sound goes, it's not really too much to it, right? There's a lot of different things you see people do, and there's a lot of different stuff that you could do with it, but really a lot of that I find to be kind of overdoing it too, you know? Like, maybe if you're starting to do too much like multi-band dynamic stuff on your bass and trying to like, you know, maybe it's time to play around with something other than like post-processing. Like, it's probably time to work on the actual sound more. So, the way I like to do these is basically having these like very harmonically rich things, right? And then also a sub-oscillator. These are also often made just with basic saw waves and square waves too, which is totally valid. But you're basically creating this harmonically rich waveform, however you do it, whether it's saw waves and square waves or whether it's wavetables, and then the sub-oscillator also sounds good on a case-by-case basis. And then you bring it into a low-pass filter, which has like a punchy envelope on it. Right, the envelope looks like that, and there you go. Now, the thing about this, it seems simple, but you really want to play around with stuff like the slope, for example. If you don't have that right, like this is the default setting. You get that, right? Even you can see that sustain where it just sits there instead of all the way down. See how the bass is a little bit fatter with the sustain up? So this is why I say, like, if you find yourself trying to like multi-band compress this and do all this stuff to make it work, probably it was time to just go back and mess with the sustain on the envelope. You know, like, people underrate how much the like inner workings of the synth can really sort of help your mixing, right? So that's the first synth. It's going to be that kind of a bass. Then we got our classic trance gate chords. Now, because you have this crazy trance gate going, I want to start by saying, like, usually you want to keep this kind of simple, right? In this case, it's just the basic chords. We are inverting them, so this would be, like in the first one being a C major, that would be a really basic C major. But I'm taking it and I'm doing like this. I'm putting the 5th down and I'm putting the 3rd up. Right, and you can see it's basic held out chords if you get rid of the trance gate. You know, and these chords also have to work on their own. They can't just be like good because it has the trance gate, right? It's chords that already would work really well with this progression. In this case, I'm just following the chord progression. And then you're going to add the trance gate, and that's going to... You know, because ultimately it still has to work at its core, right? And I think that's just really important before we talk any sound design, honestly. We've got this sines wavetable and then the saw wave. So this is another thing where it's like just trying to kind of get creative with it. It starts like this. Just like that basic saw wave with a bunch of unison. But then bringing in stuff like this wavetable. I've noticed this with a lot of the newer producers. You know, they're pushing to kind of do new stuff with this and kind of take it and not just make that same saw wave, super saw, trance gate we always heard. So adding something like the sines, or even going into like a cooler, like, right? It's just doing something to try to give it a little bit of texture. That's not just a basic saw wave with unison. Then we have the trance gate. Now the way I like to do this inside of Ableton is using a utility and a shaper. You're going to make the shaper like this. You can also get this one in the description if you want to just do that. It's literally shaped like the trance gate. It's and you can also like make this a little unique too. Like then you can, right? So you can make your own pattern with this, and then you literally just map it to the gain of this utility. Then you're gonna set the rate. You gotta make sure you set the rate properly, because like depending on how you do this too, because if you have it like, you could also just make one of these and then make it a whole bar. It's really up to you, or make it a quarter note. Now you're also gonna have an issue because it's gonna it makes the gain go really, really high on the utility, and that's why you're gonna use this offset and the depth. And I can even be better about that. Like if you just bring it down. Right, see, we're not clipping anymore. We're not creating a whole bunch of noise. So you just have to use the offset, because by default, and if you just turn the depth up, right, it's just super, super loud. I think that's about as much as you need to hear of that. So if you do this right, it'll get the trance gate. Then just a high pass filter. And I also like to use a bit of reverb or delay after it too. I think that's important with the trance gate, because like, you know, it's very choppy. This gives it a little bit more life. And especially with the delays too. Like if you play around with like making it stereo. Right, that delay can really make it as well. Then we got the third and final synth, which is going to be these kinds of leads. Now, I want to show you the pattern first on this one, because I think it can be easy to make a lead, right, and just start going crazy and doing, like, honestly, way too much. And I hear that in a lot of tracks where people are like, why isn't my track working? Or what do I need to do to mix the lead? Well, you know, sound design starts with the notes. Like, anybody that really does this kind of knows that, because the sound has to react to what the notes are doing. Now, in this case, it's about being a bit more sparse and just letting the chords sing, right? You already have this other thing that's like super in your face. I mean, this is like a lot of like just straight up stimulation for the brain, right? Like you don't need a lead to be going wah 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 wah. In this case, just having just a few notes, and it's a lot catchier. It makes these voices, it makes that hit harder. So it's like, just taking that space, and even how we have like the first half is a lot busier, and then it takes a break. And a lot of the modern stuff, but also the trance classics really work on that too. Like, I look at this kind of like the logo, like a logo, usually some of the best logos are the ones where it's like just the text, or just like, a little symbol that lets you know, like, what company it is. It's not like, look how crazy my MIDI file is, right? So it's just simple. It's in key. We're doing, again, if we're looking at this C major, we're going root note, major 7, major 6, third there as well, and just sticking to a few simple voices and creating that tagline for the track. Don't overthink this. And then the sound can kind of react to that, because in this case, like, we have these two saw waves, super detuned, a bunch of unison, but then also the delay and stuff is what really makes it. And then, like, distorting that delay, which brings out the delay. Right, I like using this overdrive as like a bit of a filter, you know, like it doesn't sound so much distorted, but it just kind of has a bit more high end and mid to it, which is great. You know, and that's another thing with these kind of synths is like distortion isn't always like that distortion, like insane heavy thing that you would think of. It's really like, it can also be used very much as a tool, especially this one with Ableton. And you can hear it really brings out the delay too. And then again, it goes back to like, because we have this MIDI that gives you a second to hear the delay. Right, so, you know, the synth on this one can be pretty simple. It's basically, you know, your old school super solid lead, but it's doing stuff like this that can really allow you to make it your own. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. That's the 3 synths you need to know to make trance music today. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. You can get the core trance pack, which has everything you saw in this video, plus a whole lot more. Literally like a giant library for making trance music. It's right at the top of the description. Thanks for the support, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.